semi-insightful.
As insightful as we ever get.
Right. Like this, and we'll explain what this means as we get into it. But like, usually we have more parameters, we have more guardrails, we have something to guide us in one direction or the other. And I don't know that we've done an episode, at least not in very recent memory, that we've had so much runway to work with. And that's exciting and terrifying.
Mostly the latter.
I'm still stuck on the fact that this is supposed to be insightful.
It's coming. It's coming. I mean, they have to think it's coming, so they actually listen to the rest of it, and then they can email us afterwards, and we'll tell them how at the end. So they have to wait, so they could bombard us with all the bad, email messages.
If they don't know by now how to tell us how much we suck.
If they don't know it by now.
If they don't know it. We should get to actual music and then the much, much worse than the music podcast. So hit the music right now. And it is the Fairly KickAss podcast. You got Dan, you got Jay, you got Zack, and you got that new, as I'm sure the kids haven't said that in like 2 decades, but we look back through the pages of what we've done previously. I'm getting the head shake. The kids have never said that. Confirmed. No kid has ever said that new.
No, not once.
In the annals of history. June of 24 was
anals.
the last time. Oh, we have decorum. We do, I promise. It's somewhere. We've missed it, but it's in a closet, I think, somewhere. June of 2024 is when we introduced our Coverlutions episode type. And I didn't go back farther than that. I wanted to, but then time was a factor. But I feel like we probably introduce a new episode type at least once a year. And since Coverlutions came out in June of 24, we were getting close to being due. So new episode alert. So it's called SomeOnes. And just like the disclaimer with Coverlutions, this might be the first and only time you hear this episode type. Depending on how it goes, if it bombs, then we will shelve it right next to the TRL ones, RIP TRL ones. We remember you with no fondness at all. The three of us have each gotten a year within the last 50 years. And the premise is that we are basically taking a number one on a chart from that year and doing a little mini deep dive about it, somewhere in the 5 to 10 minute range, much shorter than our previous deep dives that we've done on full artists. And we are going to talk about something that has to do with that song. That's where the guardrails come into play and are completely gone. So no idea what direction we're all going to go.
Me either.
Right. It's an adventure. The charts in question, also no guardrails, also no parameters. Literally a chart. If it was a number one hit on a chart in the year provided, then it is officially valid. And I don't know, I'm curious to see, and obviously we won't spoil anything, but I'm curious how close y'all played things to the vest all around, because there was a lot of room to go off track on this one, and I'm super excited to see if that ended up happening.
I mean, it doesn't give too much away. I did play it pretty close to the vest this time. Surprisingly enough, I didn't expect that, but I did.
So did I, although don't get me wrong, I was looking for the opening to not. Like I obviously, I didn't want to, but I found another way around it. I found a different take. I think it's a different take as opposed to just, the biggest song of that year, according to the biggest chart of the year.
Right. Well, it sounds like I might have been the one to have strayed furthest off course then. I don't know. I'm
I guess
very
we'll find
excited.
out.
Yeah.
So we randomly generated what years we were going to get, but did we randomly generate what order we were going to speak in?
No, we did not, and that's why I'm stalling for time, because
that's him as we normally do when we do a re-rack. Someone needs to tap dance whilst he gets a random number generator and gets our batting order,
which I do have.
Who's in the skip position? I'm sorry. Who's the second or who's the first? Who's the skip? And then who's on the base paths?
The first batter up for bids today is going to be Jay, who drew the year 1996.
Yeah.
Jay's going to be followed by Dan, who drew the year 1979. And I will be cleaning up the rear, as they say in sports vernacular, with 2010.
Did you just call yourself toilet paper? I don't think so.
I'm 2-ply, bud. I'm 2-ply. I meant to say 10-ply, but 2-ply is actually probably worse.
I thought that's what you were going for, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Everyone's invited to my super soft birthday party next week.
Something about a cup of baby carrots. Let's go.
Jay, there is no clock. It's all very loose.
Yeah.
So
I should come in right around 5 minutes. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll
I think we're all in that same general vicinity.
That's what I was aiming for.
The floor is yours, my friend.
Okay. Sounds good. I will say that due to a completely uninteresting, totally banal turn of events, I looked to Canada to find a song to talk about for the year drawn for me, which was 1996. And I'll get into why here in just a minute, but I wanted to preface it with that. I'm going to go with my song of the year 1996 is Alanis Morissette's You Learn. It was the fourth single from her seminal album, Jagged Little Pill, released in 95. And it carved a unique niche in Canadian music history by becoming the top performing single of 1996. This is all according to RPM magazine, by the way, which was it's Billboard's kind of a thing, but not really. So this is RPM. This achievement is particularly compelling because it had a relatively modest 3 non-consecutive weeks at the number 1 position on the Canadian RPM 100 hit tracks chart in July. This contrasts with the longer reigns of other singles from the same album, namely Ironic, which held the top spot for 6 weeks, and Head Over Feet, which dominated for 7. It was knocked from the top spot by the Tragically Hip and Bryan Adams 1 week each before coming back for 2 more weeks. So that's 3 total. 1 week on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on at number 1. Furthermore, its peak at number 6 on the US Billboard Hot 100 suggests a different level of impact in the American market. So despite these factors, You Learn resonated profoundly with Canadian audiences throughout the year, ultimately solidifying its place as an intriguing chart topper whose success transcended simple metrics of peak position and duration. Okay, so the Canadian singles chart of 96 was a pretty diverse landscape featuring 23 different songs reaching that coveted number 1 spot. Chart toppers represented a mix of international and Canadian talent like Celine Dion, Eric Clapton, Mariah Carey, and the aforementioned Tragically Hip. In the US, on the other hand, there were only 9 artists that reached number 1 throughout the entire year, hence me using the Canadian and RPM charts for this escapade. There were only 9, and they all wound up on the year-end chart. From August 1st to November 2nd was the Macarena. There just wasn't enough to work with. Alanis emerged as the dominant force, sort of achieving an unprecedented 4 number 1 singles in Canada that year from Jagged Little Pill, Hand in My Pocket, Ironic, Head Over Feet. And it was You Learn that had consistent performance that ultimately claimed the title of the year's biggest single in Canada, which is why that's interesting. So it was the number 1 song for the entire year, despite the fact that it was blown out of the water by even other songs from that album. I don't know if the Canadian system is completely different, but it looks like RPM calculates things using like a cumulative point system that rewards consistent high placement instead of like weeks at the top. The musical style of You Learn stood out against a backdrop of typical charting music in both the US and Canada that year. Pop ballads like One Sweet Day and Eric Clapton's Change the World kind of dominated the airwaves, and You Learn offered a distinct alternative rock sound. It's driving beat, introspective lyrics, all about learning from mistakes, and Morissette's her signature raw emotive voice provides a stark contrast to the smoother, more polished sounds that were often found at the top of the charts. It was a more personal, edgy style, and it resonated with a significant segment of the audience that looked for something beyond the mainstream pop landscape. Further differentiating itself was that lyrical honesty and vulnerability. It sort of had that grunge model of being over emotive, angsty, but it didn't sound like it at all. It tackled the messiness of life, advocating for embracing imperfections and finding wisdom in missteps. And it did it while moving beyond that whole grungy, depressive thing that were even present at that time in the mid 90s by artists like Sheryl Crow and others, even in Alanis' same milieu. The thematic focus coupled with the raw musicality offered a refreshing and relatable perspective that likely contributed to its strong connection with listeners, particularly younger audiences navigating their own experiences of self-discovery. I would like to mention, too, that this album was a significant departure for Alanis herself, who had previously been known in Canada for dance pop albums. She had a self-titled album called Alanis and another one called Now Is the Time. And that shift to alternative rock with that intense personal focus was something that was new to Canada for her. And her willingness to express those raw emotions and tackle taboo subjects like Everything You Heard From You Ought to Know, it made Jagged Little Pill that cultural phenomenon, and it sold millions worldwide and solidified her as a cultural impact. I find that the song is a fascinating case because you can't find the metrics that made it the top performing single in Canada, other than that hit number one at some point throughout the year. And then people talked about it for a while. But then if you were to name the best tracks from Jagged Little Pill, everybody has a favorite track from Jagged Little Pill. How frequently would You Learn come up as the number one song from that record? You're going to look at You Ought to Know. You're going to look at Ironic. Probably not anybody's favorite anymore, but at the time, maybe. And Head Over Feet would have been one of my personal favorites from the record. But You Learn is a phenomenal track that sort of gets overlooked now. It was this huge, impactful song. That's not a word. At the time that we sort of gloss over now. So that's why I chose it as the number one song that I wanted to talk about for this here SomeOnes episode.
Very nice. Hell yeah. Great way to get us started with this new episode type. And just from my personal standpoint, just kind of hearkening back to the mode that we used to all be in back when we were doing the deep dives. And it was just kind of a wave of nostalgia, which is not a thing I expected to ever have in relation to this podcast. But that was very cool.
Thanks. I hope I understood the assignment.
No notes. Knocked it out of the park as expected.
I think I'm completely with you also when you say that You Learn wouldn't be my choice off this record. Literally anything, all the other four songs. Head Over Feet, probably.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense, nor can I either find any justification for it.
Right.
Like you said, like it just doesn't, like the Canadian just like, we like this one. And that was it.
Yeah, I did some research into how the chart toppers are, or like how they pick the year end thing at RPM, or Billboard for that matter, in Canada, and I came up empty. I really couldn't find anything.
However, if it does kind of put a few things into perspective, for 5 weeks, apparently, the number one song in the entire country of Canada was Key West Intermezzo, like John Mellencamp. So
yeah.
Does that lead to some suspicions? I think so.
Probably.
The thing that you mentioned, I think it was specific to the RPM chart that really threw me off, was you were talking about the other songs from Jagged Little Pill and their chart impacts. And I think you had mentioned that Ironic was number one on the chart for 6 weeks.
Something like that.
And Head Over Feet was number one for 7.
Yeah.
And that was shocking to me because I would have assumed that Ironic or You Want to Know in some combination would have been by far Alanis Morissette's biggest hits worldwide in every country. So that was that, plus You Learn being the number one song of the year in total, like was really interesting to me.
Yeah, well, the album dropped in 95. So, and I did not do this research. So I'm assuming that You Ought to Know would have been on the charts in 95.
Gotcha.
But I didn't back that. I didn't look into that to back it up.
No, it stands to reason. I'm as big of a hit as that was, for sure.
Yeah. But it is wild to me that those other two songs spent that much time on the list and then this comes out on top as the best performing single of the year. I don't know where that comes from, but I love it.
So, you ready for 1995 in Canada?
Ooh,
Yeah.
I am excited.
Hand in My Pocket took over the number one spot on December 4th and didn't relinquish it until January 96.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
You ought to know, never hit number one.
Wow.
Excuse
See, that's
I beg your pardon?
surprising.
That's extreme. Wow, I am shocked, honestly.
In a year where Jan Arden and Diane Ferris had number one hits in Canada. In a year where the top song in Canada, which spent a total of 5 weeks over the summer at number one chart, was I'll Be There For You. The Canadians had no room on top of the chart for You Ought to Know.
Wow.
That's
Till I
super-
Hear It From You had a month and a half on top.
Hey, that's about.
Take That got 3 weeks.
I will not accept any take that slander on this podcast. That makes me want to look into that more. Like maybe we'll do something around like other non-Billboard charts at some point. I know we've bandied some things about over the years, but it's always super interesting.
We'll have to send that to the think tank.
Yeah. We're not debuting anything new for a while, probably until 26 at the earliest.
Yeah, and I
Coming soon.
I did look into using the US Billboard Hot 100 first, but it was lame. So
Agreed.
I didn't.
No arguments here.
All right. Well, where do we go from here?
Yeah, Dan, you drew 1979. Did you stay within the US, within the Billboard charts? How did you? Actually, no, I won't even say anything else.
No, you're fine.
We'll
Actually,
cede the floor to you.
We can start with that conversation because I did initially think about it, but then it turns out that doing the research to find an obscure music chart from 1979 was way more effort than I wanted to put into it. So I did kind of play it to the vest. But of all the things that I could have chosen, because after looking at the year in music that was 1979, I was surprised by my just kind of scanning the charts, and I knew there was an artist I had to highlight. Mostly because she kind of quietly had the year of the year, but also because she made a ton of history and probably doesn't get the universal praise that some of her compatriots do. And also a friend of the show will be quite jazzed to hear that we spent some time featuring the great Donna Summer, who dominated the charts and the record books in 1979.
Booyah.
And before we dive into the actual song, let's go over that performance that year. On April 25th, 1979, Summer released her 7th studio album, Bad Girls, the most successful of her career. And here's where the first and more casual observation could be misconstrued, because to the average music mind, this is sort of where she begins because she blows up here. And it's not necessarily the peak of a career that actually began on vinyl in 1974 and in music altogether in the late 60s. Her first single was actually released in 1968. Off of the German recording of the musical Hair, a German version of Aquarius. Yeah, good luck, God bless on that one. 2 singles off of the record in 1974, but much like the record itself, only released in the Netherlands and Germany. But it was 1975's release of Love to Love You Baby that fully announced her rise to the top of the charts, both the dance and pop charts. It would also begin her highly successful partnership with both Casablanca Records, which, if you know that name, you know the direction we're heading, and Giorgio Moroder. 4 years later, we get to Summer's only record to hit the top spot of the Billboard 200, Bad Girls. It would stay in that number one slot for a total of 6 weeks, dominating the summer and spawning 6 singles, with 2 of them, Hot Stuff and Bad Girls, each reaching number one on the Hot 100 and both going multiple times platinum. Which brings us to the reason that I chose Summer and her song that was the historic chart achievement that she achieved. The Hot 100 for the week of June 23rd, 79 saw Bad Girls jump up to number 5 while Hot Stuff was sitting on the pinnacle, and that was the first time that a female artist had multiple songs hit the top 10 in the same week. Something we just expect from the Taylors and the Megans and the Aries and even the Katies back in the day. But this was the first time that it happened was only 45 years ago, and it genuinely surprised me that that was the case. So that all being said, I decided to go with a track that actually sat atop the chart longer, and that was the title track, Bad Girls, #1 for 5 weeks in 79. And why that over Hot Stuff, which actually seems to end up in a whole lot more places in the resulting 45 years? Well, because of the fact that it is one of the most maddeningly catchy songs of the era. Some would argue only supplanted by the last disco hit, Funky Town. But Bad Girls is obviously more than the toot toots and the beep beeps that the title immediately evokes. It is a funky, brassy slice of pure disco, whistles and all. And even though it's only 1 year older than the aforementioned Funky Town, it is a whole different world of disco. OG disco, if you will, where the tracks are heavier on the funk guitar and the horns and the strings. They are lusher and less so on the booming bass and the drums and the synth lines and the random sound effects that defined the end of the disco era. Bad Girls and Hot Stuff as well are disco rock, really, opening up another avenue for the queen of disco to conquer, although she didn't necessarily willingly take that name, but eventually did embrace it. And that's all the more evident that Hot Stuff won Summer her second of 5 Grammys for Best Rock Vocal Performance. And all this to deliver the unique story of the treatment of sex workers. Probably the best song on the topic, which is also an odd set statement to put together. Taking inspiration from a story of one of her assistants who was mistaken for a prostitute by police. Summer, Bruce Sedano, Joe Esposito, and Eddie Hawkinson crafted a tale that made efforts to humanize sex workers, the sex workers they had seen on the Sunset Strip, presenting a far different picture than the standard portrayal of ladies of the night at the time. It was actually enough of a departure when it was written that Casablanca Records founder Neil Bogart tried to convince Summer to give the song to Cher, which part of me would like to hear that version. Part of me is terrified of that version. But instead, Summer decided to put it away and keep it for herself, which was absolutely the right choice at the end of the day. Bad Girls would end the year as the #2 song on the year-end Billboard Hot 100, only held back from the top spot by The Knack and My Sharona, which also not the track you would expect to headline the year 1979. If I had to put a guess on it, I would have assumed that the word Bee Gees would have been somewhere near there, but no, it was in fact not them. For the record, Hot Stuff came in at #7, and MacArthur Park, released off a live album in 1978, was #12, solidifying Summer's banner year, although no reports on whatever happened to the cake. In fact, the summer really so belonged to Summer that for the week of June 16th, Bad Girls, the album, sat on top of the Billboard 200 chart. Hot Stuff sat on top of the Hot 100. And then 1 week later, Bad Girls would make it a treble when it hit #1 on the U.S. top R&B album chart. As I mentioned, Bad Girls, the song and the album, would be the peak of pop success for Summer. That one was her last solo #1. She actually did hit the top of the Hot 100 once more in the year, just with a duet with Barbra Streisand. And album-wise, it was her only studio disc to top the Billboard 200. 1978's Live and More and 1979's compilation On the Radio, the Greatest Hits double album, also found their way to the top spot, but studio-wise, it was just Bad Girls. And all compiled to selling more than 100 million albums worldwide, with all 3 of those #1s also going platinum. And if you need one more data point that 1979 was truly Donna Summer's year, the only other artist to have 3 #1s that year were those Bee Gees, which in 1979, they were still the juggernaut, bitch.
Good. I wasn't sure if you were completely done yet. Just wanted to make sure.
I wasn't either, but yes, let's wrap. Let's stop there.
Okay, sounds good. Honestly, it's another one of those things where I forget about that song until someone mentions it, and I'm like, yes.
Exactly. And that's why I want to do that one and not Hot Stuff, because everyone knows that one.
Right.
That's like I said, to your more casual listeners, that's the one that they know, if they know a Donna Summer song for sure, or at least one of the 70s.
Yeah. I did a little bit of looking up while you were talking too, and since I was on the Canadian chart thing, I decided to look at this as well. And interestingly enough, the US is the only country where that song hit #1.
Really?
Yeah, it's the only one. It was like, oh, and the Canadian dance pop charts, specifically the dance charts, dance or
I could see
urban.
that.
I really want to see the rest of that chart now. The Canadian dance chart.
Yeah, the rest of it, like 14 in the UK. Canada hit number 2 on the top singles, but yeah, peaked at number 1 in the US only.
Well, it was again when see you added the dance chart aspect of it, and the UK. I don't know what I assume the rest of Europe followed, but UK took a couple extra years to let go of disco.
Yep.
And they did disco a little bit differently than we did. So I could almost see why a disco rock, which is also a statement that's an interesting one, a disco rock song may not have done as well over there as it would have here, where I think the genre was a lot wider, way more wide open than maybe the rest of the world, or at least in the Eurodance side of things.
Yeah, I also wouldn't have thought about it until you said something, but the chart success in places outside the US may have had, or rather the lack thereof, may have had something to do with the subject matter. Because it might have been seen, it may have been seen as prurient or obscene in certain places.
That you didn't think of that until you said that's also true.
Yeah, I didn't think about it from that angle either, but that would make sense. Certainly for that, in several countries even today, but especially, in that
in the 70s,
era. Yeah, for sure.
Which is interesting because I would have also, like, just looking at lyrics wise, I would have assumed that, Hot Stuff was actually a little more explicit because it was a lot more directly about sex. And yet, number 1 in Australia, number 1 in Canada, number 1 in Japan, number 1 in Switzerland, number 11 in the UK. You stuffy bastards.
Yeah, I kept wanting to figure out if I wanted to say this just because I don't, like, it's not a bit. It seems like it's going to be a bit, but it's not. But like this and Hot Stuff, the duo of those two songs combined were the quintessential song of the summer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, actually.
It didn't feel good, but like it's true. It's not even just because like, oh, they were popular, but it's just the vibe. And I will admit I had some internet issues during parts of Dan's presentation. So if you already made this connection, then please cut this out of the show altogether.
No, you're good there, because I go back and forth and trying to run the song of the summer at some point every summer for the last 5 years. And because I don't feel qualified enough to accurately judge the vibe that should go with the song of the summer, because we're way off topic, but that term, like you mentioned, feels the vibe of the time and place. And I can't make that judgment now, 40 some years down the line. What's the vibe of 1979 besides wanting fuel?
Hey, it's a vibe. Don't get me wrong.
It's a vibe.
Oh.
And here we're about to get our own gas shortages, but that's neither here nor there. It's another show. What is here and now will be Zack.
Oh no. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's all I could say. So as we mentioned earlier in the show, my year was 2010, which admitted that I was ruining the RNG gods for bestowing that specific year upon me. Because what the heck was I going to do with the year 2010? I mean, at least judging by the Billboard Hot 100 for that year, it was limited. It was either going to be Rihanna or Katy Perry or Kesha or a few other also-rans with far less success throughout the year. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy Rihanna and Kesha and Katy Perry, but it was like, those stories have been told already. I wanted something new and exciting and fun. So I looked at some of the other charts, and boy, oh boy, did I hit on the motherlode. Because this particular song was not number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, But the song was number one on the Billboard Hot Rap Songs chart. In fact, it was the first newly anointed song on that chart in the year 2010, overtaking 2009's strong finisher, Empire State of Mind, and hanging on for just under 2 months before itself being overtaken by B.O.B. and Bruno Mars's Nothing on You. It was also number one on the Billboard Rhythmic chart around the same time, which I just mentioned because the Billboard Rhythmic chart is a thing, and I still don't understand exactly what it means. But again, that's for another episode of this podcast. But it's admittedly kind of perfect because this is a topic that I've wanted to cover for years, literal years, on this podcast, but haven't had a good reason to do so. Nor has anyone asked for this, to be fair. It's like that meme that you see where it's like no one, and then it's just like a blank, and then it's like Zack, and then it's like this specific song and everything about it. Like, no one wants this. I don't know that I want this, but considering that this is the direction that my feeble lizard brain went, there was no stopping it. There was no turning back at that moment. So with that said, dear co-hosts, dear producer, and dearest of all listeners, it is finally time for the Where Are They Now Young Money Bedrock edition. Buckle up, because we're hitting them all, baby. We are hitting them all. And not all of them, just the ones who have lyrics or production in the song. So apologies in advance to Chanel, Lil Chucky, Lil Twist, and the kind of sort of current president of Young Money Entertainment being Mac Main, among all of the other artists on the label. We'll talk more about the label as a whole as we get towards the end. And we will at least start off with some more quick hits, because at least a few of these folks, you know where they are. You know what they've done. They've been in the public eye. They've been very, very successful. So I don't want to spend too terribly much time on those folks. And we'll start that journey specifically with the head cheese of them all, because we talked about the current president, Mac Main, but what about the first president, as well as the founder of Young Money Entertainment and the self-proclaimed commissioner? Because labels have commissioners, that's absolutely a thing. That, of course, being Lil Wayne, aka Lil Tunchi, aka a million other nicknames, to go along with his hundreds of millions of records that he sold throughout his career. You know what Lil Wayne is, you know what he's done. I don't really have to go too much into depth with that. Young Money Records, certainly had its own success in its heyday, and much of that coming on Lil Wayne's shoulders, partially due to the work that he's done, and partially, let's be real, due to name recognition. But name recognition is important. It's valuable, and he certainly maximized that to his benefit and to the benefit, presumably, of the folks that were also with him on that imprint. He also was on The Masked Singer. He was pardoned by Donald Trump after catching a firearms case, and he is releasing the Carter 6 later this year. So yeah, lots going on even today in the world of Lil Wayne. So I'm sure one of us will have something to say about that whenever it drops in the summer. But let's jump forward to Nicki Minaj, who was making her label debut, not her debut. She had done some work, I think, with Noriega, actually, on a track with him. But this was her Young Money debut specifically. Not much going on for her after that, besides 5 albums and worldwide recognition, tours, tons of album sales, and being one of the most successful hip-hop artists in the game over the last 10, 15, 20 years. You had most recently 2023's Pink Friday 2, which is going to be a recurring theme, by the way, of albums with the same name, but just a numeral in front of them. You had the Carter 6, you had Pink Friday 2. More to come on this topic as we go forward. But Pink Friday 2 did go platinum, and the album was the best-selling female rap album in 2023 and in 2024. And for all we know, maybe will be, depending on how Cowboy Carter is categorized, maybe will be the best-selling female rap album in 2025 as well. TBD. But safe to say, Nicki Minaj doing pretty well. And then there's Drake. So Drake was a few months off of his debut album, Thank Me Later, when Bedrock was released. And as we all sit here, we are less than a month away from the 1-year anniversary of a minor, not the best year for the Sixth God, all told. But I'm sure that we will all forget about the mean and very likely true things that Kendrick Lamar said about him in a couple millennia. You know, I'm sure that he will also be able to sleep on his piles and piles of money, as he also has sold scads and scads of records and is one of the most successful music artists of all time in his own right. So yeah, it's hard to shed tears for Drake. But again, you know where he's at. You've seen everything that has come out. Most of you watched the Super Bowl. The unfortunate ones of you have listened to some sexy songs for you, and for that I sincerely apologize. But yeah, Drake not doing too poorly for himself. But what about the rest? So the producer Kane Beats, for example, had a couple big tracks, including Bottoms Up by Trey Songz, as well as Nicki Minaj's Super Bass, Lupe Fiasco's Modest Mouse ode, The Show Goes On, but not really much in the past decade or so. So it was hard to find more recent stuff from a lot of these non-Wayne, Drake, Nicki folks. Wasn't for lack of effort, but there just isn't a lot out there for a lot of them. Kane is certainly one of those, but maybe someone that'll pop up from a production standpoint at some point in the future. And then there's that infamous hook crooned by Lloyd, whose full name, by the way, is Lloyd Polite Jr., and how you don't go by your full name when it's as cool sounding as Lloyd Polite Jr. is beyond me. Plenty of success prior to Bedrock. First 3 albums landing in the top 15 of the Billboard 200 albums chart. 2011's King of Hearts, which came after Bedrock, also ending up in the top 15. Released an album called True in 2018, which was unfortunately a falling off for him. Latest I saw from him was from earlier this year on Instagram, saying goodbye to a dude that I think a lot of us probably don't understand how much impact he had in the hip hop game. A little bit of a diversion, but the passing of Irv Gotti back in February, I believe it was, of this year. Regardless, we have other folks to get through, so we're not lollygagging here. We're going straight into the next artist on the track, being that grocery bag gigolo himself, Gutta Gutta, which, thanks to Wikipedia, I know that he also goes by Gutta. So there's that for you. Very, very important anecdote. He was in a group called Squad Up, spelled SQAD, with our aforementioned Young Money Commissioner Lil Wayne back in the late 90s. So him and Wayne have been a thing for a long time, but has released some of his own music, including his first mixtape, 2009's Guttaville, 2010's Back to Guttaville, 2012's Guttaville 3, and he's apparently working on his next mixtape, which you are going to be shocked to learn is going to be titled Guttaville 4. This is just a thing that young money artists do, and I don't get it. It's really, really weird, but the naming of albums and keeping that same name with multiple iterations is just a pervasive thing. Maybe it's a coaching thing from Wayne, who knows. But yeah, not much besides that mixtape for Gutta Gutta. Certainly has not had nearly as much success as he did with Bedrock. Tyga up next, 8 albums spanning from 2008 to this year's NSFW. He had several mixtapes prior to that point. He had several legal issues, including showing the breasts of 3 women in a music video when he agreed that they'd be edited out. So that's not a great look, Tyga. Pretty shitty thing to do there. Also, for an unpaid jewelry bill from Jason of Beverly Hills. So apparently a dude that just cannot stay out of trouble. But also a dude that has been putting out music. I think most recently, like I said, NSFW. Yeah, he is, I would say, just under the range of popularity of like a Wayne and a Nicki Minaj. But yeah, rounding out the verses is Harlem's own Jay Mills, part of the rap battle scene back in the day. Interestingly, walked away from deals with both Warner Brothers and Universal before signing with Young Money. He has tracks dropping on a mixtape as recently as November of last year, so one of the more current artists from this song, and he's pretty nice with it. I would suggest Barry Belafonte from his mixtape Potent Vibes Only 5, which is a heck of a bop, but besides Nicki and Drake and Wayne himself, was pretty slim pickings on the more recent members. But Jay Mills was certainly one that's been doing things here over the last little bit. So yeah, that is the Where Are They Now that no one asked for, that no one wanted, and that I can finally get out of my system so I don't have to think about this ever again in the future. Thank you very much for attending my bed talk.
Well, I will say this. I think you took it in the only way you could have if you were going to talk about that track, right? Like the track itself doesn't leave you a lot to speak about, and anything else that would have been on a chart from that year, everybody knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's no secrets. There's no walls. And I honestly could not have told you half of their names.
There were so many.
There were a lot.
Anyway, there's so many, and I know this is an inside joke, but I would like to take this moment to officially welcome all the stars of Young Money Productions, as well as Gotta Gotta.
Knockout by proxy. I love it.
I'm glad that I'm honestly, I when you said that was your song, I can't tell you how disappointed I was, but the fact that you went the artist route as opposed to talking about the song, which is a hot grocery bag full of garbage.
Garbage might be polite.
I was doing a thing there.
Yep.
The random there's a genre that was hot at the time that is sort of along the line of minivan rock, what you call hashtag rap, where there's like a couple stylistic things about it. This is the valley of what would be considered that, which is why you got the random grocery bag in the middle of it, or I Race for Your Love, Shake and Bake, Ricky Bobby, which made sense in 2009 and 2010.
Drake's lyrics are so awful on this song. So
right.
bad.
So I'm glad that's the route you went.
Yeah, very glad that's the route you went.
Yeah, it was to get in the mood. I listened to the track like 3 or 4 times in a row. Not recommended for anyone under any circumstances. But yeah, it was at least interesting to see the differences between the haves and the have-nots, so to speak, of the group. And Tyga kind of being the one like in the middle, that like maybe if he wasn't such a piece of shit and had gotten his shit together, maybe he could have been on a Drake level or on a Nicki Minaj level. It
is interesting to see what the levels, like you said, that the collective has produced between with Drake, Nicki, Lil Wayne. Lloyd pops up every once in a while on a single that is successful.
Yeah.
Although it feels like it's been a while. I haven't heard it, but I'd be interested to go back and find with a version that has Omarion singing the chorus.
I saw that. I did not look for that version. I haven't heard it, honestly.
Neither have I, because I've never actually sought this song out.
Nope.
I've just had it imposed upon me. I've never. But I would be interested to see if his vocals change at least the hook at all, the feel of that, if it gets any less. God, I don't even know how to describe the hook, because it's not like skeevy, because Lloyd's voice doesn't come off that way.
Yeah.
But maybe it's less squeaky. I don't know how else to put it.
Stupid is the word you're looking for.
Well, okay, there's no way around that. But he has a unique upper range.
I will at least say that I wondered if there's maybe some static there, because I did notice some things where there were apparently some like internet rumors going around about Omarion's status with Young Money, which prompted Mac Main to come out and say that he's no longer with the label. But that was the only thing I could find, which makes me think that there was maybe a little something brewing under there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably. Interesting.
Obviously, Nicki and Drake have moved on label-wise. Nicki, I think, directly with Republic Records, who is the parent label of the Young Money imprint. and Drake, of course, with OVO sound.
But when Lil Wayne sold everything to UMG or UMD, excuse me, that all of Drake's pre-2018 stuff went to Universal.
Yep. Which I hate. I mean, just from a personal standpoint, like.
So, yeah.
It just seems slimy.
I mean, it's the industry.
I was just saying, it's right.
Yeah.
It's welcome to the music industry, babe.
Right. Yeah. It's part of it, right? Like it's just my own misgivings, but like it's certainly far from the first time that's happened.
Yeah. No.
And it won't be the last.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure.
Well, cool.
3 up and 3 down, boys.
That was fun.
Well done.
It was very interesting. And I learned something today.
As did I. Yeah. Listeners, I hope you learned something from the 3 of our presentations. We would like to learn from you, specifically what you thought of this episode. Again, it's kind of a pilot for right now. We're going to take it back and see if it's something that we could possibly do in the future if we want to work it into the semi-regular rotation. We have so many episode types now. We certainly don't need it, but if it's something that's of interest, then yeah, let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, I like it.
You can reach us, as always, on the socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at FairlyKickAss on all 4. FairlyKickAss@gmail.com. FairlyKickAss.com for your ride-along playlist. Probably not going to put out a playlist for this one just because there's 3 songs. I mean, like it's easy to pull those up. So
and one of those songs is Bedrock.
There are 2 songs on this list. Yeah, I can't put that song on a list in good faith. It doesn't feel right. But yeah, certainly go back and listen to all of our previous episodes, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening right now. If you need a suggestion for a friend or family member who would like to listen to this podcast, tell them not to because it's a mistake. But if they insist, Apple Music, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, pretty much literally anywhere. As we always say, if there's somewhere we're not, let us know and we will get there, as soon as we possibly can.
Also, and I'm not above shilling for this too, but if there is a year and or a chart and or a song that you would like to hear us cover for a future iteration of SomeOnes, also hit us up. We are more than happy to take some suggestions and do some research for you. Although
Absolutely.
You'll probably get the same answers if you just Google it yourself, but you won't get them delivered in our dulcet tones.
That's the selling point, right?
That's the selling point.
But,
We're in trouble.
I gotta lie to myself somehow about these stuff. It's just gotta.
the only way to sleep at night.
Gets me through the day.
Yeah. Hit us up. We'll crowdsource this whole damn episode type if that's what y'all want. Let us know. Until the next time,